A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 48. Be Good Archie. Benny. Estella finally broke into a smile. Archie and Benny were also excited to be reunited with Estella. The children sat together and observed each other as though it was their first meeting. A while later, Archie frowned and asked, "Didn't Mr. Farwell take good care of you? You seem to have lost some weight." Estella's cheeks were obviously not as chubby as before. Upon hearing that, Estella gave her own cheeks a pinch and smiled adorably. She tilted her head in contemplation before responding with a slight whisper, "I guess it's because I was in low spirits." The boys stared at her anxiously. "Did Mr. Farwell bully you?" Estella's mood had improved considerably when the boys appeared, and she found herself unable to contain her joyful grin. She stuck her tongue out mischievously. "It's because I didn't get to see Ms. Jarvis and you both. Daddy made me angry, so he dared not upset me further." Archie and Benny relaxed at her answer. Benny couldn't resist asking in concern, "Ms. Ward told us Mr. Farwell wants to transfer you to another school. Is that true?" Estella gave a slight nod, followed by a shake of her head. "Yes, I've been transferred to a new school, but I only stayed there for one day." The boys were confused. Estella puffed her cheeks and added, "I don't like that school. I want to be with you both." Archie and Benny couldn't bear to see her disappointment, so they quickly comforted her, "We want to be with you, too." Benny raised his arm in a rush to console her, only for his sleeves to roll down and expose the wound on his arm. Estella immediately spotted the scar. She frowned in concern and demanded, "What is this? What happened?" Benny flashed a guilty smile. "I fell down accidentally. Mommy has already tended to it." He slowly rolled down his sleeve and put his hand back down. Estella pouted unhappily when she heard him mention Roxanne. "It has been a long time since I last saw Ms. Jarvis." Benny belatedly realized he had said the wrong thing and cast a look in Archie's direction, silently asking him for help. Archie had no idea how to salvage the situation. Roxanne didn't want to see Estella, and no amount of persuasion would make her change her mind. When the boys were racking their brains to figure out a way to change the topic, Estella suddenly perked up. "Why don't you take me with you?" she suggested. Before Archie and Benny realized what she meant, she inched nearer to them and tugged at their sleeves, pleading, "Could I please come with you to your house so I can meet Ms. Jarvis?" The boys couldn't bring themselves to say no as she was staring at them imploringly. They agreed readily. "Sure. However, you must be obedient." Estella bobbed her head obediently. After the three kids played in the room for some time, Estella glanced at the clock and urged, "Let's go. Daddy is going to come back anytime soon." Hearing that, Archie and Benny got to their feet hastily. It would be hard for them to bring Estella with them once Lucian came home. The kids sneaked out of Estella's room quietly. Benny was the first to head downstairs to divert Catalina's attention. "Miss Catalina, I'd like some water." He gazed at Catalina and blinked innocently. Catalina felt her heart melt, and she quickly turned around to pour him a cup of water without hesitation. Below minimum temperature. Archie took the chance to sprint out of the mansion with Estella in tow. They then hid in a corner and waited for Benny to leave. Inside the mansion, Catalina had just poured a cup of water for Benny and assumed he was about to go upstairs. To her surprise, Benny gave her a polite bow. "Thank you, Ms. Catalina. I shall take my leave now." Catalina frowned in puzzlement. What about Archie? They both came together, so she couldn't understand why they would leave separately. Benny pursed his lips guiltily. "Archie left a while ago. He and I snuck in here without telling Mommy, and we were busted. She's probably giving him an earful right now." Catalina nodded understandingly. She found their antics amusing. "I can't believe they came this far just to visit a friend." Ms. Jarvis must be beside herself with worry. She suddenly recalled what happened previously and offered, "I'll ask someone to give you a ride home." Enemy waved his hands anxiously. "And no need for that. My mommy is waiting for me outside," he stammered out a lie. Catalina didn't ponder over his words and nodded. "Be careful." Benny bobbed his head obediently and trotted out of the mansion. Once he was outside, he quickly ran toward Archie and Estella. Archie waved at them. "Let's go." The other two agreed and trailed dutifully behind him. After they exited the manor, Archie and Benny were especially vigilant. They had Estella with them, so it would be bad for them to encounter the older children they previously met. Fortunately, they didn't come across those kids throughout their journey and successfully arrived at the junction. After finishing her tasks, Catalina belatedly remembered that she had forgotten to invite the boys to stay for lunch. She assumed they had arrived home by now. Without thinking much, she went upstairs to get Estella. However, there was no response even after she knocked on the door for some time. "Ms. Estella? Can I come in now?" Catalina asked worriedly. She carefully pushed the door open to realize that the room was empty. There was no one in sight. Catalina's heart sank to the bottom of her stomach. "Ms. Estella," she raised her voice. She searched the room frantically but to no avail. Just as she was about to call the bodyguards to search the surroundings downstairs, an idea dawned on her. Benny's actions seemed weird. Did Ms. Estella leave with them both? The thought of that possibility startled Catalina. "I let Mr. Farwell down by failing to look after Ms. Estella when he entrusted her to me this morning before leaving for work. She managed to slip away while I was on duty." Feeling both guilty and remorseful, Catalina instantly contacted Lucian. Meanwhile, Lucian was listening to Caden reporting the work progress in his office. When he received Catalina's call, he assumed Estella was throwing a tantrum again. "Mr. Farwell, Ms. Estella left with Archie and Benny," Catalina told him apologetically. A scowl appeared on Lucian's face when he learned about that. Caden became aware that the temperature in the office had dropped below the minimum. He regarded his employer's expression warily. "I wonder what happened to Ms. Estella." A while later, he sensed the temperature rising back to normal. Lucian said, "Got it. I'll pick her up there later." His voice was deep as usual. With that, he ended the call. Caden was confused as he had no idea what just happened. Why did Mr. Farwell's mood fluctuate? Heart softened. Mere moments after Catalina hung up, Sonia arrived at the Farwell residence. "Mrs. Farwell." Both Lucian and Estella weren't around, so she didn't know how to deal with Sonia. Sonia gave a curt nod and glanced around the living room. "Where is Essie?" Catalina was at a loss for words. She could tell Lucian that the boys had taken Estella away, but she was too afraid to tell Sonia the truth. After all, she knew that Sonia disliked Roxanne. Ms. Estella," Catalina hesitated. Sonia grew impatient. "Where is she? Is she upstairs? I'll go take a look myself." With that, she strode upstairs. Catalina dared not say anything and could only watch as Sonia headed upstairs to Estella's room. A while later, Sonia stormed downstairs wearing an unhappy scowl. "I thought Essie is supposed to be homeschooled. Why isn't she around on a weekend?" she demanded. Giving Catalina a dubious look, she asked, "Did Lucian take her out?" She pulled out her phone to call Lucian. Knowing it was impossible to hide the truth, Catalina revealed honestly, "Archie and Benny came earlier. I think Ms. Estella left with them." Sonia's expression turned as dark as thunder. "Who told you to let them in?" "I didn't tell Lucian to bring Essie back so she could meet the boys. It's pretty obvious where they would take her." Sonia's voice was shrill and demanding. When Catalina heard Sonia's question, she was filled with guilt since she had let the boys in secretly. She hung her head in shame silently. Sonia glared at her. "I can't believe you failed to take care of her." With that, she stormed out of the manor. "I brought her back the first time, so I can do it again." After witnessing Sonia's departure from the manor, Catalina hesitated briefly before dialing Lucian's number once again. Back in Farwell Group's CEO's office, Caden was still reporting the work progress to Lucian. It was his first time seeing Lucian answering so many calls at work. Mrs. Farwell came earlier. She learned that Ms. Estella was taken away and might be. Catalina trailed off helplessly. Lucian's brows furrowed. "Got it." He ended the call and told Caden, "Send the rest to my email." Before Caden could react, he noticed Lucian rising to his feet and hurrying toward the elevator. Lucian's expression was grim as he exited the elevator and got into his car. He then proceeded to drive to Roxanne's house. Previously, Estella couldn't stop wailing when his mother forcibly dragged her out of Roxanne's house. He was worried that if Estella experienced another traumatic event, she would regress back to her old self. She might even completely isolate herself from the outside world. Lucian's expression darkened when the thought of that possibility crossed his mind. He stepped on the gas pedal. At the same time, the kid's car rolled to a stop outside the mansion. It had been a while since Estella had seen Roxanne, so the little girl was a bit anxious. She trailed behind the boys, wondering if Roxanne would still like her. The boys had no idea what was on her mind and dragged her into the mansion. Roxanne had just arrived home after working overtime. She was about to head upstairs to see Archie and Benny. Right then, the mansion's door creaked open, and in walked the three kids, holding hands. Roxanne thought she was hallucinating when she saw Estella at her house. "Ms. Jarvis," Estella greeted softly. Nevertheless, the little girl was too afraid to approach her. Roxanne snapped out of her reverie. The sight of Estella's shy demeanor made her heart soften. "Mindful of your words. Upon realizing Roxanne didn't feel any animosity towards her, Estella leaped into her arms happily. Smiling, Roxanne wrapped her arms around Estella and asked gently, "Why are you with Archie and Benny?" Hearing her question, Archie and Benny exchanged a sheepish glance before directing their gaze toward Estella. "Should we let Essie tell Mommy we sneaked her out, or should we tell her ourselves? It has been a while since Mommy and Essie last met. She won't get mad at Essie." Estella didn't disappoint them, for she quickly revealed, "Archie and Benny came to visit me. I wanted to visit you, so I asked them to bring me here." Her voice sounded smug. "Luckily, I followed them back. Otherwise, there is no telling when I'll get to meet Ms. Jarvis." Roxanne stiffened when she heard Estella's answer. "Essie ran away from home with Archie and Benny. If Lucian finds out about it, how should I explain it to him? He'll most probably assume the boys persuaded Essie to follow them back to my house." With that thought in mind, she released her hold on Estella slowly. Panic flashed across Estella's face. "Ms. Jarvis, don't get mad." Roxanne patted her head comfortingly and explained, "I have to inform your dad that you're here. Otherwise, he'll be concerned." Estella muttered reluctantly, "I don't want Daddy. Daddy was the one who refused to let me see Ms. Jarvis, Archie, and Benny." Upon seeing Estella's reaction at the mention of her dad, Roxanne felt troubled. She could finally understand Sonia and Aubrey's feelings. Estella had a much stronger attachment to her than she did to Lucian. Therefore, it was understandable that they did not want the little girl to continue getting in touch with Roxanne. Roxanne even came to the conclusion that they were correct, as Estella would soon be someone else's daughter. As a mother herself, she wouldn't want her child to have a close relationship with another woman. However, Roxanne couldn't bring herself to ignore Estella, especially when the latter was pouting pitifully. "Be good. I'll talk to your daddy nicely," she said and forced out a smile. Roxanne stood up to make a call to Lucian. She had just scrolled through her contacts and found Lucian's number when the doorbell rang. Hearing that, Roxanne paused in her tracks. Estella clung to Roxanne's leg like a frightened little animal and hid behind her. She thought Lucian was here to bring her back home. Roxanne gave her head a reassuring pat and went to answer the door. The sight of the newcomer caused them to blanch in shock. Estella was so flustered that she grasped the edge of Roxanne's clothes tightly, desperately wanting to conceal herself completely behind Roxanne. Archie and Benny pursed their lips and went to join Roxanne at the door. Sonia's lips twisted mockingly as she observed their actions. She then directed her gaze toward Roxanne. "Catalina informed me that your boys had sneaked Essie out of the house, so I came here to verify if it was true. Turns out Essie is indeed at your house." Roxanne furrowed her brows and refuted, "Archie and Benny simply brought Essie back here so that they could play together. They are just children, so please be mindful of your words." Claiming that the kids sneaked Estella out of her house was too serious an accusation. Sonia pinned her with a withering stare. "Why? Did I say anything wrong? Rude." Sonia turned her attention to Estella, who was hiding behind Roxanne. "Essie, come on. I'll bring you home." Estella had a firm grip on the edge of Roxanne's clothing. When she heard Sonia's words, she recoiled in fear. I've just met Ms. Jarvis, so I don't want to go home yet. Besides, Grandma looks really scary. I just didn't want to attend the new kindergarten, that's all, but she wants to discipline me like the cruel Ms. Pearson. Estella was overwhelmed by fear as she remembered Sonia's expression from that day. Sonia realized that Estella was frightened of her, so she apologized softly, "I'm here to apologize, Essie. I must have scared you that day, haven't I? I promise it won't happen again. You're my precious princess, Essie." She reached out and tried to pry away Estella's hand that was gripping Roxanne's clothes. It was frustrating to see her granddaughter preferring another woman over her. At once, Archie and Benny dashed forward to stand in front of Roxanne and protect Estella. This time, they wouldn't let Sonia bring Estella away no matter what. "Won't you control your kids?" Sonia shot an irritated glare at Roxanne. "They first sneaked Essie out of the Farwell residence, and now they are trying to prevent me from bringing her back. Why? Do they consider Essie to be their real sister?" Conflicting emotions welled up in the boys' hearts when they heard that. "We don't know who Essie's mommy is, but we are indeed her half-siblings." With that thought in mind, they grew increasingly determined to protect her. Roxanne was also reminded of the kids' relationship, but she didn't know how to reply to Sonia. As Roxanne remained silent, Sonia took a step forward and attempted to push the boys out of her way. Instinctively, Roxanne reached out to protect her children by gripping Sonia's wrist. Both women were at a standstill for a moment before Sonia withdrew her hand with a scowl. She stated coldly, "Like mother, like son. It's no wonder they are so mischievous, given that you are their mother." Roxanne believed that she had raised both boys well, so she felt a stab of anger upon hearing Sonia's criticism. "Mrs. Farwell, you can criticize me all you like, but isn't it rude of you to vent your anger on the kids?" Sonia valued her pride the most, and Roxanne's words had hit her sore spot. "What did you just say?" she shrieked. Unfazed, Roxanne said, "You claim to feel sorry for Essie, but have you ever considered why Essie is afraid of you if you truly love her? It's because your supposed love is just fulfilling your own ego." Sonia was practically quivering in rage. She looked at her granddaughter, wanting to refute Roxanne's statement with facts. However, Estella merely cowered behind Roxanne silently. Her behavior seemed to verify Roxanne's statement instead of supporting Sonia. "I already told you last time that Essie can't handle stress, but you kept forcing her to act against her wishes." "I doubt that you love her," Roxanne stated firmly. She piled on the pressure, not giving Sonia any room to maneuver. Sonia flew into a fit of anger. "You know nothing. Who are you to question me? Essie is a Farwell, so it's up to us to decide how we want to raise her. That has nothing to do with you. It is clear." Roxanne felt that this was unjust for Estella. Just because Essie is a Farwell, does that mean she should be treated this way and not be allowed to befriend people she likes? Sonia sneered, "If you're talking about your sons, then she isn't allowed to befriend them." A flash of disappointment crossed Archie and Benny's faces when they heard that. "Does Grandma hate us that much? She won't even allow us to be friends with Essie." Roxanne was upset, too. "Mrs. Farwell, the children have nothing to do with our grudge. Roxanne knew that the elderly lady's hatred for Archie and Benny must have stemmed from her, for they rarely interacted with Sonia. With that thought in mind, she cast the boys an apologetic look. Though the boys had no idea about their own background, their biological grandmother ended up despising them because of her. For one split second, Roxanne had the urge to reveal Archie and Benny's identities to Sonia so she would stop insulting her boys. Sonia was not interested in arguing with Roxanne. Her attention was focused on Estella as she coaxed, "Come on, Essie. Let's go home." Frightened by their argument, Estella shook her head vigorously in response to Sonia's words, her eyes reddened in fear. "No. I don't want to leave. I want to stay and play with Archie and Benny." A fresh swell of rage rose within Sonia when she realized Estella wasn't going to listen to her. Initially, she wanted to apologize to Estella for yelling at her previously. Alas, she never imagined that Estella would choose Roxanne over her. Blind with rage, Sonia stepped forward with an ugly scowl, intending to push Roxanne away. Roxanne held the kid's hands and retreated warily. Sonia was about to make a move when a car honked outside the mansion. Roxanne instinctively glanced toward the source of the noise and saw Lucian alighting from his car. He strode over to them. From afar, he was giving off an intimidating air. Roxanne's heart sank at the sight. If Lucian insists on taking Essie with him, I can't stop him. Feeling helpless, she abandoned her defensive attitude and allowed herself to relax. Sensing the change in Roxanne's attitude, Sonia stopped warily and turned over her shoulder. The sight of her son gave her confidence. "Lucian, I'm glad you're here. You must be here to pick Essie up, right?" Roxanne cast her gaze downward, unsure of how to face him. Lucian frowned slightly and said nothing. Sonia shook her head in disbelief and added, "I can't believe those boys. They must have said something to Essie to make her follow them willingly. I'm not happy about this at all. I think it would be best if Essie stayed with me." Estella's eyes widened in shock when she heard that. She promptly burst into tears. Instantly, all eyes were upon her. "No." Estella wailed so hard that she couldn't even open her eyes wide. "I want Ms. Jarvis." She wanted Roxanne, so it was obvious what she didn't want. Despite being humiliated, Sonia had to make an effort to restrain her anger in her son's presence. To try and comfort Estella, she coaxed, "Come on, stop crying. I'll buy you a present if you follow me home. Anything you want, I promise." Estella wrapped her arms around Roxanne's leg tightly and said nothing. She merely shook her head vigorously while bawling. Could she stay a while longer? There were several instances where Roxanne wanted to speak, but she decided to keep silent after remembering what Sonia said. The fact that Lucian was at the scene as well did not help. On the other hand, Archie and Benny were incredibly anxious. "Stop it, Mrs. Farwell. Essie is crying her eyes out," exclaimed Benny, who was on the brink of bursting into tears himself. Pursing his lips, Archie quietly walked to the middle of Benny and Estella to hold their hands. Lucian stood opposite the four with a deadpan expression, only half a step behind Sonia. Seeing how protective the two boys were of Estella and how Roxanne remained silent, Lucian frowned once again. "Even if you don't want me, you should have no problem going with your father, right?" Sonia thought she was being quite reasonable, but as soon as she finished her sentence, she heard her son's indifferent voice. "Stay out of this. I'll take Essie back," uttered Lucian. When Roxanne heard that, she reluctantly shut her mouth. Then, she glanced coldly at Roxanne and Lucian before turning around to walk away. She had something to say but would rather not do it in front of Roxanne, lest she got humiliated right before the younger woman. Well aware of what was on his mother's mind, Lucian quickly followed her. "Were you aware that the two little ones went to the manor?" questioned Sonia as she looked suspiciously at her son. To that, Lucian answered straightforwardly, "I was working overtime at the office so I had no idea." "Then why are you here?" Sonia did not believe her son, but then she suddenly thought of something. "Did Catalina tell you that I came over?" questioned Sonia displeasedly. Lucian did not answer the question directly, however. Not only does Essie have a sensitive personality, but she also hasn't been doing well recently. It won't take much to trigger a relapse. "Do you think that was what I was trying to do?" After listening to Lucian, Sonia got upset. "I'm Essie's grandmother. Why wouldn't I want the best for her? Roxanne was the one who heartlessly abandoned Essie, so what right does she have now to take the girl under her wing? Besides, Essie will be Aubrey's daughter sooner or later. There's no point in letting the girl get close to an outsider." At that point, Lucian felt as if he was about to have a headache. "If you really want the best for her, just go back now." Sonia did not expect that instead of siding with her, her son would try to drive her away. "Did you forget how Roxanne treated Essie? The girl may not have any idea, but are you just as oblivious?" Knitting his eyebrows, Lucian chose to keep silent. Sonia would rather not waste more time arguing with her son, so she stated, "I'll go back now, but if I don't see Essie when I return to the manor tomorrow, there's nothing you can say to stop me from taking her back to the Farwell main residence." With that, Sonia shot another cold glance at Roxanne before turning around to leave. Lucian then took a few seconds to recollect himself before heading for the mansion door. "Mr. Farwell," greeted Roxanne distantly, for she had no idea why Lucian came over. At first, she thought he wanted to help Sonia take Estella away, but after witnessing how he convinced Sonia to leave, she was utterly baffled. In response to Roxanne's greeting, Lucian simply glanced indifferently at her before shifting his attention to Estella, who had reduced her bawling to sniveling after Sonia left. "Sorry, Mr. Farwell," voiced Archie suddenly. When Lucian heard that, he looked at Archie with a raised eyebrow since he knew what the boy was apologizing for. What Archie said next was also well within his expectation. "We know we shouldn't have taken Essie away secretly, but we missed her a lot. Do you think you could let her stay a while longer? Who are you?" Even though Roxanne and Lucian knew what Archie would say, they were still moved when they heard the boy actually put his thoughts into words. After looking down at Archie, Roxanne silently shifted her gaze to Lucian. "If possible, I, too, wish Essie could stay a moment longer, at least until she calms down." Unfortunately, she knew she had no right to make such a request. Only after keeping quiet for a few seconds did Lucian turn to meet Roxanne's gaze. Clenching her fists, Roxanne then looked away and pretended to be calm. "What do you think, Ms. Jarvis?" inquired Lucian in his deep voice. Roxanne reluctantly replied, I have no say in the matter since Essie is your child, Mr. Farwell. However, I do hope that you'll respect her wishes. Since Roxanne did not intend to request him to let Estella stay, Lucian nodded understandingly in response and turned to Estella. Then you should come home with me. Estella had just stopped crying, but after hearing her father's words, her face began to scrunch up again. Seeing how the girl was about to burst into tears once again, Benny and Archie got upset at Lucian. Daddy knew Essie isn't in a good mood, but he's still forcing her. Essie doesn't want to go back, protested Benny, confronting his father with determination. Lucian was somewhat surprised by the boy's sudden statement. Then, Archie also stepped forward to shield Estella with his body. Even though he did not utter a word, his intention was crystal clear. Instead of saying anything in response, Lucian simply looked silently at Roxanne, who was frowning slightly as soon as she noticed his gaze. The woman also wanted to say something for Estella's sake, but in the face of Lucian's attitude, she couldn't bring herself to say anything. Also, she was well aware she didn't have a say in the matter. He probably would have listened to me back when he was still pursuing me, but now that he's already with Aubrey. With that thought in mind, Roxanne was quickly filled with nothing but frustration. Archie, Benny, you guys go upstairs first and let Mr. Farwell talk to Essie, Roxanne persuaded the boys, who never expected her to say that. Estella, on the other hand, thought that Roxanne did not want her around anymore, so she began bawling again while grabbing the woman's sleeve tightly, refusing to let go. When the scene descended into chaos once again, Roxanne furrowed her eyebrows helplessly. Lucian, however, remained standing with a deadpan expression at the door, staring at Estella and waiting for her to come to him. It took quite a while before Roxanne finally found her voice. Mr. Farwell, even though Roxanne didn't have the right to say anything, she could no longer remain silent when Estella was bawling. As Roxanne spoke, she reciprocated Estella's grip on her hand and found out that the little girl's palm was already sweating. Heartbroken, Roxanne stated, I know what you guys are thinking, but some things require time, especially considering Essie's condition. Then, Lucian spoke straightforwardly, his words striking the sore spot in Roxanne's heart. And who are you to concern yourself with Essie like that? The desire in Roxanne to speak up immediately dissipated when she heard Lucian. Her lips parted, but no words came out of her mouth. All she could do was tighten her grip on Estella's hand to comfort the girl. Then, Lucian shifted his attention to Estella. Come home with me. Mr. Lon will be coming over in the evening. Since Estella had been so emotionally unstable recently, Lucian decided to summon James for professional help. However, Estella shook her head vigorously in response and cried so hard that she could barely breathe properly. Please let Estella stay. Ms. Jarvis has a lot on her hands, so don't cause her any more trouble. Lucian bent down to grab Estella's unoccupied hand. Estella's strength was drained after bawling for a long time, so she let go of Roxanne's hand the moment Lucian took her in his arms. The woman instinctively tightened her grip but eventually let the girl go when she remembered the man's harsh words. With Estella in his arms, Lucian patted her comfortingly on the back before turning around to leave. Daddy! Suddenly, a childish voice cried out from behind and caused Lucian to stop dead in his tracks. Roxanne's expression changed as she regarded her son. Benny's voice was loud when he called Lucian that, and his face had turned bright red, probably due to anxiety. The moment the word left his mouth, Benny regretted his action. He knew he shouldn't have done that, but he had no idea how else to stop Lucian from leaving. At that moment, Benny did not have to lift his head to look at his mother because he could already sense her shocked gaze. Panicking, the boy then turned to his brother for help. Archie, knitting his eyebrows, pretended to be calm even though he was flustered as well. "Mr. Farwell, you're Essie's father, yet you don't know what she needs? If a psychologist can actually help her, then why was she mute before she met us?" Benny quickly chimed in, "If we had a daddy, we wouldn't like it if he forced us to do things we don't want to do." The boy's words were enough to make the two adults waver once again, and Lucian began pondering. Benny's not wrong. If a psychologist were the solution, Essie wouldn't have refused to talk. However, how can I allow Essie to continue relying on Roxanne since she wanted nothing more than to cut ties with me? Roxanne, on the other hand, was still feeling apprehensive after Benny called Lucian daddy. For a moment, she even thought the boy had found out about his true identity already. The next second, she was filled with intense guilt when she heard what Benny had to say. Lucian is the boy's father, and he's standing right in front of them. I just didn't tell them because I was selfish. Guilt-ridden, the woman glanced at Lucian because she was worried he would sense something. However, as soon as she lifted her head, she unexpectedly met Lucian's stern gaze. Roxanne wondered if her eyes were playing tricks on her when she noticed resentment in the man's eyes. "Even if you need me to," at that point, Roxanne could not help but speak up again. However, she glanced concernedly at Estella mid-sentence and decided to skip the rest. "We need to be patient with Essie's condition. If necessary, I'll cooperate with you, Mr. Farwell." Roxanne knew the Farwell family wanted to distance Estella from her, so in order to make the process easier for Estella, she was willing to cooperate with the family to gradually cut down on the time she spent with the girl. Even though Archie and Benny had no idea what the adults were talking about, they had an uneasy feeling. Meanwhile, Estella was still crying since she was unsure what would happen to her. "If possible, let Essie stay for today," Roxanne lowered her eyes and pleaded without much expectation. The second Archie and Benny heard that, their eyes lit up. The boys then stared expectantly at Lucian, whose face remained expressionless. Only after a while did the man finally speak. "I'll leave her in your care then. Feel free to call me anytime should you have trouble handling her, and I'll come over to pick her up." Refusing to transfer schools, Roxanne was dumbfounded since she did not expect Lucian to agree to their request so easily. She finally regained her senses when Estella came running toward her, sobbing after her father set her down on the floor. "Ms. Jarvis," the girl quickly wrapped her arms around Roxanne's thigh. After caressing Estella's head, Roxanne looked up at Lucian, who then nodded indifferently at her and glanced at the three children before heading to his car. Only after watching Lucian drive away did Roxanne take the children into the living room. "You two look after Essie. I need to make a phone call," instructed Roxanne. Archie and Benny immediately nodded in response and did their best to comfort Estella while Roxanne hurried into a corner to call Jack, who did not take long to answer. "What's up, Ms. Jarvis?" inquired Jack. Sorry, but I'm afraid I'll have to take another rain check, replied Roxanne apologetically. According to their schedule, the two were supposed to provide medical consultation at a nursing home that afternoon, but because of how upset Estella was, Roxanne could not leave. In response, Jack chuckled unconcernedly. It's okay, we can handle things there without you. What I'm more worried about is you. Are you sick? As soon as Jack finished his sentence, he could vaguely hear crying from the other end of the line. Are the boys the ones who are sick? Jack furrowed his eyebrows confusedly. I'm fine. I just, suddenly have a private matter to tend to, answered Roxanne after glancing at the bawling Estella. Jack did not overthink the situation and simply assumed that he guessed correctly. I'll let you get back to your private matter then. After Roxanne thanked Jack gratefully, the two ended the phone call without saying anything else. Then, Roxanne hurried back to the children. Mommy, we couldn't get Essie to stop crying. Benny had disappointment written all over his face. After patting the boy's head, Roxanne lowered herself to pick up Estella. It's okay now, Essie. You have Archie, Benny, and me here. As if she felt a sense of security in Roxanne's arms, Estella finally opened her tear-filled eyes to look at the woman. Roxanne quickly patted Estella on the back when she sensed a change in the girl's emotion, trying to calm her down so she wouldn't cry too hard. I don't want to transfer schools, uttered Estella, choking on her tears. Roxanne was relieved to hear Estella speak but quickly became distressed because of what the girl said. Even though Roxanne knew what Estella wanted, there was nothing she could do about it. Ms. Jarvis. I want you, Ms. Jarvis, voiced Estella as she continued to sob. Immediately, Roxanne responded, I'm here. I'm here with you. The two boys then climbed up the couch and carefully tugged Estella's sleeve. We're here too, so you don't have to cry anymore. Roxanne could not bear to see Estella cry again, so she decided to tell a white lie to appease the girl. I'll speak to your father about it. I want you to be my mommy, added the teary-eyed Estella. Gulping, Roxanne dared not promise Estella that. However, her heart could not help but break a little every time she heard the girl sob. Only after a while did Roxanne respond, I'll always like you no matter what our relationship is. Would you dislike me if I couldn't be your mother, Essie? His in her 1061. Something is off. Estella was clearly alarmed by what Roxanne said. She couldn't stop crying and shaking her head. Roxanne wiped the girl's tears away and uttered softly, in that case, don't cry anymore. Archie and Benny helped do the same. After Roxanne said she liked Estella, the two of them repeated their mother's sentiment. It doesn't matter what our relationship is. We'll still like you, Essie. While that stopped Estella from sobbing further, she still felt quite upset. But, if I change school, I won't be able to see you two anymore. Benny promised, even if you do, we'll still visit you to play with you. If Mr. Farwell and the others forbid us from doing so, we'll just sneak our way in. Having listened to the conversation among the children, Roxanne thought, I don't think I'll let them meet each other again after this. However, Estella seemed to be moved. Roxanne didn't want to burst their bubbles, so she agreed with her silence. The three of them talked with Estella for a long while, and only then was her mood finally lifted again. Benny recounted everything interesting that had happened in the kindergarten over the past 2 days. When Roxanne finally saw Estella smiling from listening to Benny's story, she breathed a sigh of relief. "You should keep her company for a while, Archie. I have something I need Benny's help with." She was still wondering why Benny had called Lucian Daddy and wanted to ask him about it. The kids were in a happy mood at that moment, so none of them gave her statement much thought. Benny merely thought his mother needed his aid to decoding something again, so he followed her upstairs enthusiastically. It wasn't until he noticed that his mother was heading toward their bedroom instead of the study that he started to feel guilty. After he entered the room, she closed the door. "Mommy," Benny lowered his head guiltily. Seeing that, Roxanne felt something was amiss. She knew the children too well. She could tell from a glance what he was feeling. Suddenly, she panicked a little. However, lest she misunderstood the boy, she asked, "Earlier, why did you suddenly call Mr. Farwell Daddy?" Benny lowered his head and was at a loss for words. He was great at computers, but not confrontations like those. In the past, his brother would always help him navigate through situations like those, but at that moment, he was alone. He knew his mother was smart. If he answered her question too slowly, she would get suspicious. At that thought, he could only steel himself and utter, "I didn't call Mr. Farwell Daddy. I just wanted to say that he's Essie's daddy and that he can't make her cry." He raised his head to look at Roxanne's countenance. "But I got a little too anxious and only remembered to say the words daddy." Roxanne knitted her eyebrows slightly, unsure of what to believe. The children were shocked by what happened earlier, and Benny's answer does make sense. However, I can't help but feel that something's off. Also, seeing that his mother was still skeptical of the matter, Benny had a brilliant idea and started acting pitifully. "When I saw Mr. Farwell hugging Essie, I thought Archie and I would be hugged the same way if our daddy was still alive." That hit a soft spot in Roxanne's heart. She put away her suspicions and stared at her boy apologetically. "Spill the beans, I'm sorry." Roxanne lowered her head. Upon hearing that, Benny knew Roxanne had bought his lie and let out a sigh of relief in secret. He lowered his guard even further when he heard his mother apologizing to him. He tugged her sleeve obediently. "I don't blame you, Mommy." Roxanne forced a smile, but she still felt remorseful. Benny tilted his head and blurted out his thoughts, "If you really feel sorry, make Mr. Farwell our daddy. Archie and I like him a lot." Roxanne's heart clenched when she heard that. It was the first time she had heard the boy express his opinion about Lucian to her. Is it because they're related by blood that they love him so much? Roxanne felt the urge to tell Benny about his background, but then she thought about her relationship with Lucian. If Lucian learns that the boys are his children, he won't let them stay by my side. At that thought, she pinched her palm silently and swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue. "Mr. Farwell is going to marry someone else in the future, and there's nothing I can do about it." She patted his head comfortingly. "However, I can promise you that your future daddy will be someone you and your brother will like." Naturally, Benny was disappointed when his proposal was rejected by his mother. However, he found himself understanding his mother's decision when he recalled her precarious relationship with his father. He was determined to help his parents reconcile with each other. Unwilling to face Benny's disappointed countenance, Roxanne stood up and grabbed his tiny hand. "Come on. Let's head back to Essie." The boy bobbed his head and followed her downstairs. Archie and Estella were planning how to encourage their parents to make peace with each other. When they heard footsteps, they swiftly separated from one another like frightened little animals and sat on the couch, acting as though nothing had happened. Roxanne stared at them with amusement. "What secrets were you two talking about?" Calmly, Archie replied, "I was just telling Essie that Benny is very good with computers." Estella nodded in cooperation. "I'm great at it, too." Roxanne turned to the girl, surprised. No one would have expected someone as adorable and innocent-looking as her to be skilled at computers. "I certainly didn't. Then again, she is Lucian's child. In that context, it's not shocking to learn she has a very high IQ. What did you need Benny's help with, Ms. Jarvis?" "If he can't help you, maybe I can give it a try," Estella offered. Roxanne glanced at Benny before grinning at the other children. "It's nothing much. I'm not that familiar with computers, so I asked him to teach me a thing or two about a problem I was having." Benny nodded in agreement. While Estella didn't think much about her lie, Archie had a good guess why his mother had asked his brother for help. He was slightly worried as he wondered how Benny had answered her questions. He noticed his little brother's expression appeared a bit odd. He didn't spill the beans, did he? He couldn't help but panic. When Benny sat by his side, he asked in a whisper, "Did you let it slip?" He only relaxed when his brother assured him that didn't happen. "Make them reconcile." The brothers played with Estella until very late into the night because she would be leaving the next day. It was only when Roxanne went to the boys' bedroom to call for Estella that she reluctantly left. Roxanne wondered what the children talked about when she noticed how spirited Estella appeared upon returning to her bedroom. "Ms. Jarvis," Estella called out in her piping voice abruptly while Roxanne was helping her take a bath. Roxanne stopped what she was doing and looked at Estella in confusion. The girl stared at her with wide eyes and asked, "Can you really not be my mommy, Ms. Jarvis?" Earlier, while she was still crying, she had already asked that question, and Roxanne had already answered no. Roxanne was surprised the girl would ask that again. Afraid that her answer would cause Estella to cry once more, she contemplated the words she should use. Estella, however, seemed to have known Roxanne's answer. She lowered her eyes and said aggrievedly, "I know you don't like Daddy because he keeps angering you, Ms. Jarvis, and I'm Daddy's daughter. You will definitely not want to become my mommy. That's not what I meant. It's just that, your daddy is already engaged to someone, so he has to marry that person in the future." The girl's eyes lit up. "This means you actually like Daddy?" Hearing that rendered Roxanne speechless for a few moments. The children always have a false dichotomous perspective on everything. Just because I denied the claim that I disliked Lucian, she thought I actually liked him, and I couldn't be with him solely because of Aubrey. If I rebut her again, it'll be the same as admitting I dislike Lucian and, consequently, her as well. At that moment, She had no idea how to explain the situation properly to the girl. Estella scrutinized Roxanne's expression. When she saw the troubled look on the woman's face, a sly glint flashed past her eyes. She recalled the plan she had devised with the boys. Ms. Jarvis and Daddy had a heated argument that they still haven't gotten over. We need to come up with a plan to make them reconcile quickly. It's Daddy's fault for pissing you off, Ms. Jarvis. I'll teach Daddy a lesson on your behalf. Roxanne had no rebuttals to offer. It's like she's implying Lucian and I are already a thing. Essie, she changed the topic resignedly. It's getting late. Let's hurry so you can rest early. Estella beamed, although it was difficult to tell if it was because she had fun talking about the matter or because Roxanne did not deny her conclusion. In response to Roxanne's words, the girl nodded obediently. Roxanne was a little absent-minded as she dried Estella with a towel because her mind was still distracted by the emotions the girl had elicited in her. I want to listen to Sleeping Beauty, Ms. Jarvis. Proactively, Estella crawled up to the bed and stared at the woman with anticipation, as if stars were hiding in her eyes. Sleeping Beauty. Roxanne's mind was thrown into further chaos as she inadvertently recalled the play from before. However, she couldn't bear to reject the girl's request when she saw how excited the latter was. As she narrated the fairy tale, the events that took place during the play repeated in her mind like a movie. When she reached the kissing scene, she found it hard to continue the story. Thankfully, the girl had already fallen asleep. After releasing a sigh of relief, Roxanne lay beside Estella with a complicated feeling. Dislike them. The next morning, when Roxanne woke up early, Estella was still asleep. She left the bed gently to avoid disturbing the girl and went downstairs to prepare the children's breakfast. Because of the messy situation last night, she woke up a little later than usual even though she was awake before the children. She hadn't even prepared breakfast when the doorbell rang. Roxanne stopped what she was doing, and her heart sank. Is Lucian that eager to bring Essie back home? The doorbell rang incessantly, which roused the children from their slumber and prompted them to descend the stairs. Is Mr. Farwell here, Mommy? Richie frowned at the entrance. Estella's gleeful countenance from yesterday had been replaced with a pitiful expression as she stood behind the boys. I want to stay with Archie and Benny longer. Seeing that the children had arrived downstairs, Roxanne had no choice but to put the things in her hands down and open the door. Mr. Fair. Roxanne cut herself off when she realized the visitor wasn't who she thought it was. Why are you here, Mr. Damaris? Jack was holding a bouquet of baby's breath with a warm smile. I was worried when you didn't come yesterday or explain why you couldn't make it, so I decided to visit early in the morning. I didn't disturb your rest, did I? As he spoke, he looked inside the living room and saw 3 children staring at him warily. He couldn't help but be taken aback at the sight of the kids. They are, when the children snapped back to reality, they politely but distantly greeted Jack. Hello, Mr. Damaris. Estella was unfamiliar with Jack, but she still greeted him with the boys. Jack nodded with a smile. Good morning to you 3. Then he raised his eyebrow at Roxanne. The girl is Mr. Farwell's daughter, isn't she? Roxanne hesitated for a few seconds before inclining her head. She came here to play with Archie and Benny. He's aware the three of them are in the same class, although I don't know if he'd believe what I just said. She lowered her eyes guiltily, afraid he would notice anything unusual. Thankfully, Jack simply nodded meaningfully and sized her up. I thought you didn't show up yesterday because you were sick. It seems that my concern is unfounded. Sorry for worrying you, Mr. Damaris. Roxanne gave a small smile, then looked at the flowers in his hand in puzzlement. Jack handed the flowers to her after detecting her apparent interest in them. I thought you were feeling unwell, but I wasn't sure what to bring when visiting you, so I brought you these flowers. I hope you don't dislike them. Roxanne was slightly stunned, her heart filled with hesitation. It sounds reasonable, but accepting his flowers in front of the children is a little. I'm afraid they'll misunderstand something. Just as she wondered what to do, Estella trotted toward her and tugged her shirt. Ms. Jarvis. Roxanne lowered her eyes. Estella rubbed her tummy and whined, I'm hungry. Roxanne smiled apologetically at Estella before turning her attention back to Jack. Sorry, I woke up a little late today. I haven't prepared their breakfasts. Please, come in and sit with us. Sure. How are we born? Roxanne released a sigh of relief in her heart as she stepped into the kitchen alone. Thank goodness Essie came to my rescue. I hope Jack won't think I was being impertinent for not directly accepting his flowers. Inside the living room, when Jack sat on the couch, he placed the flowers in his hand next to him. The children looked at him from a distance. Upon sensing their gaze, Jack lifted his eyebrow and faced the boys. Do you two like the presents I gifted you? The boys exchanged a glance. They didn't open Jack's gifts because they saw him as a potential love rival to Lucian. Despite their animosity toward him, they felt compelled to answer his question amiably. Archie smiled at him. It's really fun. Thank you, Mr. Damaris. Hearing that, Estella snorted imperceptibly. While it was the first time she had met Jack, the alarm bells in her mind hadn't stopped ringing since he first appeared. This guy is doing the same thing Daddy did when he was courting Ms. Jarvis. He visited Ms. Jarvis early in the morning because he was supposedly concerned about her health. Then, he openly gifted her flowers. He must be pursuing Ms. Jarvis. She was enraged as she thought about how proactive Jack was and how her father was still angry at Roxanne. Archie and Benny could tell she was furious and why. Mr. Damaris, I once saw on the television that flowers are only given to people you like. So why did you buy Mommy flowers? Benny started. Jack was stunned for a moment. Friends can give each other flowers too. Benny ignored his response and continued, if you like Mommy, I suggest you give up because she already has someone in her heart. Surprise flashed past the man's eyes as he stared at the boy with intrigue. Oh! Benny met Jack's eyes assertively and proclaimed, Mommy likes Daddy. Roxanne's expression changed when she stepped out of the kitchen and heard that. What are you talking about, Benny? The boy pouted and said seriously, isn't that true? If you don't like Daddy, then how are we born? While the boys did not know who their father was, Roxanne did. Then, as she related Benny's words to what Estella said last night, she felt a peculiar sensation swelling in her. As she didn't feel it was appropriate for her to refute Benny's words, she mentioned breakfast instead. All right, that's enough. Essie's hungry. Let's eat first. Only then did the children cave in and line up next to the dining table, waiting to be seated. Roxanne turned to Jack and offered politely, "Have you eaten, Mr. Damaris? Join us if you haven't." The moment the children heard Roxanne's invitation, they halted their movements and looked at the man on the couch. Jack pursed his lips upon spotting the children's look. "No, thanks. I already ate before I came." It was only then the children returned to whatever they were doing. Roxanne nodded at him and enjoyed breakfast with the children. However, because of Jack's presence, the children ate inattentively. A co-worker sending flowers. After breakfast, Roxanne was afraid the children would say anything inappropriate, so she asked them to play outside. Jack was still waiting in the living room. She cleaned up the dining room, then sat next to him. The mother of Mr. Farwell's daughter has always been mysterious. Jack's voice rang out abruptly. Roxanne was stunned. She did not understand why he suddenly brought that topic up. Studying her expression, he resumed, "If not for the fact that you already have 2 children, I would think you're the mother of his daughter." "That's impossible." "Don't say nonsense like that, Mr. Damaris," Roxanne quickly denied. "You two resemble each other. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it. Good-looking people tend to have similar features, after all." Jack smiled, his words seemingly ambiguous and implying something. Furrowing her eyebrows slightly, Roxanne kept her composure and changed the topic. "How did the medical consultation go yesterday, by the way?" Jack sensed her anxiety and gazed at her meaningfully for a few seconds, making her feel uneasy. Fortunately for her, he went along with her wishes and changed the topic. The children were feeling a little unhappy as they gathered in front of the mansion entrance. Estella knitted her eyebrows as she stared at the boys. "Does Mr. Damaris have a good relationship with Ms. Jarvis?" The boys exchanged a glance, uncertain of what to say. They didn't want to tell her Jack was Lucian's potential love rival and had a good relationship with Roxanne, as they were uncertain how that knowledge would affect her unstable mood. "Mommy said they're colleagues. She's been fairly busy with work lately, so they've been interacting with each other more frequently," Archie said. Estella pursed her lips and stared at the entrance, skeptical of Archie's words. Why would he, a mere co-worker, send Ms. Jarvis flowers? Daddy has many colleagues, yet he never gave any of them flowers. I wonder what Ms. Jarvis is talking about with Mr. Damaris inside. Also, why did she chase us out? The more she thought about it, the more worried she was. The boys' hearts sank when they sensed Estella's foul mood. The 3 children gazed at the entrance with great bitterness and deep hatred, wishing they could run straight to Roxanne's side and monitor her interaction with Jack. After a while, the boys made a decision and said, "How about we go in right now?" However, when they turned around, they realized Estella was gone. Essie. Archie and Benny combed the courtyard to look for her. Estella was squatting next to Jack's car, doing something. The moment she heard their voices, she wrapped up her task, concealed her tools, and hid behind Jack's car. As Archie moved closer, she abruptly ran out from behind the car. "Why are you here, Essie?" Archie's eyes lit up. Estella lowered her head guiltily and muttered, I just want to play hide and seek." Archie took in the girl's expression. While he found her demeanor odd, he didn't give it too much thought. "If you want to play hide and seek, we can play with you. But you must inform us beforehand if you are going somewhere next time." Estella nodded obediently. "Only friends." After Archie found Estella, he summoned Benny. "Let's head inside and listen to what Mommy is talking about with Mr. Damaris." Upon hearing that suggestion, the other two agreed. They opened the door carefully and saw Roxanne sitting on the single-seat couch and chatting with Jack. Both adults had a smile on their faces. The alarm bells in the children's minds rang loudly the instant they noticed the faint smile on Roxanne's face. Estella acted against her usual behavior and sprinted straight to Roxanne's side. "Essie." It was only then Roxanne noticed the children had returned. Jack gave Roxanne and Estella the once-over and said half-intentionally, "I can see the resemblance even clearer like this." That sent Roxanne into a panic. Innocently, Estella asked Roxanne, "What resemblance, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne patted her head, shot a look at Jack, and said, "It's nothing. It's just a random comment from Mr. Damaris." Then she stood up and faced Jack. "Is there anything else, Mr. Damaris?" Of course, as a veteran in the business industry, he could tell she was hinting for him to leave. He smiled at the kids and said, "It's almost noon. Even though I've known the boys for a long while now, I still haven't had the chance to treat them to a meal. How about we all have lunch together today?" Then he looked at Estella meaningfully. "It just so happens that Mr. Farwell's daughter is here, so consider this my invitation to him for a meal." Roxanne felt uncomfortable upon hearing that. Is he implying something? Also, his pretext for inviting the children to lunch is so strange. At that thought, she was ready to reject the offer on the children's behalf. To her surprise, before she could speak, Estella's voice rang out. "Thank you, Mr. Damaris, but I much prefer Ms. Jarvis cooking." The boys nodded in agreement. Their rejection was direct, which prompted Jack to raise his eyebrow. Roxanne was stunned for a few seconds before she returned to her senses and smiled at Jack apologetically. "I'm sorry. Mr. Farwell will be here soon to pick up Essie, so there's not enough time for lunch outside. Next time, perhaps." Jack nodded nonchalantly and rose to his feet. "Very well, then. I'll take my leave now." Roxanne proceeded to send him out with the children. Once Jack's car was far enough away, the children glanced at Roxanne before returning to the living room in unison. The sight of the flowers still lying on the couch made their faces fall. Roxanne was confounded by their reaction until she realized they were staring at the flowers. She could tell what the children were thinking. "They want me to be with Lucian. While I don't think of Jack the way they assume I do, I don't have a future with Lucian. Yet, I can't help but feel guilty when I face them." "Ms. Jarvis," Estella lowered her eyes with disappointment and tugged at the hem of Roxanne's shirt. Squatting down, Roxanne looked at her. "What's the matter? Is it because you want to be with Mr. Damaris that you can't be my mommy?" The girl sounded aggrieved. Roxanne was taken aback by that question. "Mr. Damaris and I are only friends. You accepted Mr. Damaris' flower but not Daddy's." I still remember Ms. Jarvis almost returned the roses Daddy bought for her when we went to a concert. For a moment, Roxanne wasn't sure how to answer that question. Her conversation about work with Jack and the sudden return of the children had diverted her attention from the presence of the flowers. She had completely forgotten about it. If the children hadn't cared so much about it, she wouldn't have remembered it. Roxanne's silence prompted Estella to tilt her head thoughtfully and question, "Is it because you like baby's breath and not roses?" Overthinking yes, Roxanne blurted out. That answer brought a smile to Estella's face again. However, she still found the sight of the flowers to be an eyesore. The boys also detested the flower, so they put it in a corner. "This is taking up space. Let's put it here first." Roxanne was aware of her son's intentions, but she didn't comment on it. Suddenly, the doorbell rang again. The brothers tensed up as they subconsciously protected Estella behind them. If Mr. Damaris was the one who pressed the doorbell earlier, then this must be Mr. Farwell. "We still haven't played hide and seek with Essie yet." Roxanne thought the same, but despite her unwillingness to let Estella leave, she still opened the door. When she saw the person at the door, she was puzzled. "Mr. Damaris? Why are you back here? Is there anything else?" Jack smiled helplessly. "I may need to stay at your place for a while because someone punctured my tire with a nail. It went flat after I drove for a while." As he spoke, he glanced at the children somewhat intentionally. Without hesitation, Roxanne let him in. Jack wondered out loud, "It's strange. The tire was fine when I came by in the morning. I don't know when it was punctured by a nail." Upon detecting his stare, the boys looked back at him confidently. "Why is he looking at us? We didn't do anything. Is he trying to sow discord between Mommy and us?" A second later, Jack looked away. Standing behind the boys, Estella hid her hands behind her back guiltily and played with her fingers. "What are you going to do now, Mr. Damaris? How about I send you back home?" Roxanne suggested. "No need. I've already contacted the towing company. The driver will pick me up once they arrive, so I'll be staying here until then." "All right," Roxanne responded, then began talking about work with him once more. The children kept their eyes on the adults alertly from the side. Sensing Archie's and Benny's gaze, Jack frowned as though he thought of something. Then he pondered the matter further and realized he might have acted too antagonistically toward the two. Roxanne, perplexed by the strange changes in his expression, asked, "What's the matter?" Jack recomposed himself and shook his head with a smile. "It's nothing. I'm probably overthinking things." Despite his words, he was still visibly distracted when they resumed their conversation. After the driver called Jack, Roxanne sent him out. Children didn't follow her. Before he entered the car, Jack stopped, appearing as though he had something to say. Roxanne's heart sank as she waited for him to speak. "I have something I'm not sure if I should mention." Jack sounded hesitant. Roxanne nodded, hinting him to continue. Jack furrowed his brows. "I want to preface that what I'm about to say doesn't come from a place of animosity. However, for some reason, the children seem to have a very hostile attitude toward me. They're likely the only people who had access to my car before my tire was punctured." Roxanne's heart dropped violently. I do remember asking the children to play outside in the morning. They could have sabotaged his car during that period. And he's right about the children's antagonism toward him. Mischievous. Roxanne's thoughts were in disarray. Still, she defended the children against Jack's accusation. You're overthinking it, Mr. Damaris. There's no way these young children can do something like this. Besides, you're assuming they have the strength to pull this off, a strength that they may not possess. Jack smiled indifferently. It was just a guess. Besides, as I said, I'm not harboring any animosity toward them. It'll be great if that's not the case. Roxanne forced a smile. After Jack left, she returned to the mansion with a complicated expression. The children were huddled together, discussing Roxanne's relationship with Jack and how they could force him to leave far away from her. They dispersed immediately when they saw Roxanne entering. On her way back, she kept thinking about Jack's words. Upon closing the door behind her, she sat next to the children. Mommy! Ms. Jarvis! The children promptly gathered around her. Instead of responding to or looking at them, Roxanne lowered her eyes and asked, "Did you all know about Mr. Damaris' punctured tire?" The children nodded innocently because that was the first thing Jack had mentioned when he returned to the house. Roxanne studied the children's expressions. "Do you know who did it, then?" The children's faces stiffened. Using their lips, the boys answered, "We may not like Mr. Damaris, but we wouldn't do something like that." Suddenly, they recalled something. Their eyes glinted, and they quietly shielded Estella behind them. However, Roxanne was only suspicious of her sons and not the girl. "I don't like dishonest children. I'll give you all one more chance. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll check the surveillance footage. I'll be very upset if I discover you have been lying." Frowning, Archie grabbed his mother's shirt. "We really didn't do it, Mommy. Don't check the surveillance footage." Benny chimed in, "The three of us were together. We didn't do it." "I'm sorry. Please don't be upset with me, Ms. Jarvis," Estella piped up right then. The girl panicked when she heard the last sentence Roxanne uttered because the only thing she was afraid of was getting resented by Roxanne. Roxanne was stunned as she looked at Estella. The girl's cheeks reddened as she teared up. She looked as though she would cry the next moment. "It's all my fault. Please don't be mad at Archie and Benny, Ms. Jarvis," Estella sobbed. "I sneaked out and did it. They don't know anything about it. Know what did wrong now, so please don't hate me, Ms. Jarvis." Roxanne was so astonished that she had no idea what to do. "I suspected the boys to be behind this after what Jack told me. After all, they tend to be mischievous. I didn't at all anticipate Essie to be responsible. My initial plan was to punish whoever was the culprit, but seeing how hard Essie is crying right now, I don't think I can do it. Besides, I don't have the right to either way. Do not do anything bad, it's our fault, Mommy. We didn't keep a close eye on Essie." The boys had already guessed the truth when their mother questioned them. Even though Estella had admitted to the offense, they still wanted to take the blame for her mistake. Roxanne did not know what to say as she watched the three of them protect each other. "I would have been contented to see them caring for each other in another situation, but they're covering for each other at the wrong time now. What do I do? Moments later, she suppressed her emotions and placed Estella on her thighs. Tell me the truth, Essie. Did you do this by yourself or with the boys? As Estella had learned that Roxanne disliked dishonest children, she, of course, wasn't going to lie. Besides, she never wanted to drag the brothers down with her either. I did it by myself, she choked out. Roxanne nodded and wiped the girl's tears away. Why did you do it? Even though the girl was crying intensely, she still answered the question, because I don't like Mr. Damaris. It was the justification Roxanne expected but didn't want to hear. When Mr. Damaris gifted you flowers, you accepted it. But when Daddy did it, you tried to return it to him. Also, you always argue with Daddy and rarely smile at him. Yet, you keep smiling at Mr. Damaris. Estella listed everything she despised about Jack. The more Roxanne listened to the girl, the lower her heart sank. I have no clue Essie is capable of such fierce jealousy at a young age, and it's all because she's very attached to me. Estella tugged at Roxanne's shirt pitifully and added, I only want you to be with Daddy and become my mommy. Please don't hate me, Ms. Jarvis. Feeling a little dumbstruck, Roxanne patted the girl's head. She's too attached to me. It's our fault, Mommy. If we hadn't spoken badly about Mr. Damaris, Essie wouldn't have had a prejudice against him. Archie and Benny pleaded on Estella's behalf. Roxanne sighed. You two did do something wrong, but this has nothing to do with either of you. The brothers knitted their eyebrows and stared at their mother. They didn't want Estella to be punished. Roxanne turned to look at Estella, whose face was wet with tears. I know what you're thinking, but this isn't right. No matter how much you like or dislike someone, you can't touch their stuff just because you want to. Destroying other people's property is even worse. Do you understand? Estella hiccuped and nodded obediently. Then Roxanne turned to the boys. As for you two, Archie and Benny straightened up. I know you care for Essie, but you can't always cover for her. You must set good examples for her to follow. Don't do anything bad, and don't speak ill of others behind their backs, Roxanne advised. The brothers bobbed their heads and said, We know what we did wrong now. It won't happen again. Roxanne nodded and removed Estella from her embrace. Now that you three know your mistakes, it's time to accept your punishments. The children stood in line uneasily when they heard the word punishment. Solemnly, Roxanne swept her gaze past the three of them and remained quiet for a while. Then she pointed at the wall. All of you will stand there for 15 minutes. Although the boys were usually well behaved, they had been punished before. They made their way to a corner and stood facing the wall. Estella moved exceptionally slowly. When Roxanne saw that, she furrowed her eyebrows. Thinking that Estella still thought herself innocent, she urged, You'll need to stand there longer if you walk this slow. Upon hearing that, the girl gathered the courage to turn back to Roxanne. Roxanne was puzzled. Is the punishment too severe? Is that why she's looking at me? Aggrievedly, Estella asked, If I accept the punishment, will you still like me, Ms. Jarvis? The girl's question melted Roxanne's heart into a puddle. If you learn from your mistake and don't repeat them, I'll continue to like you, just as I always did. Estella's eyes lit up as she promised, "Okay, Ms. Jarvis. I'll definitely behave myself." She quickened her pace and arrived next to the boys. "I'm sorry. It's my fault for getting us punished." Archie and Benny shook their heads. "We're best friends, and best friends share the joys and sorrows in life together." When she heard that, Roxanne wasn't sure if she should laugh or cry. Those in the know would know that they were being punished, but those not in the know would think they had done something incredible. As Roxanne gazed at Estella's back, she fell into deep thought. "The punishment was something I came up with after careful deliberations. While I don't think Lucian will consider my punishment a little too much, I still feel uncertain about it since I don't technically have the right to educate his child. This is the best harmless solution I could conjure. When he arrives, I still need to explain the situation to him. Essie does tend to go to extremes. I wonder if it's because it's her nature or a symptom of her autism. She'll require a psychologist's intervention if it's the latter." 15 minutes later, the children's punishment was over. Upon glancing at the time, Roxanne realized it was almost noon, yet Lucian still hadn't shown up. When is he going to pick up Essie? The children were similarly nervous. Archie turned to Estella, looking serious. "Since Mr. Farwell hasn't arrived, let's play hide and seek." Her desire to play that game didn't slip his mind. When she heard that, she lowered her head apologetically at him. "I'm sorry for lying to you earlier, Archie. I just wanted to." She had only used that excuse to hide her wrongdoing. But after being lectured by Roxanne, she knew what she had done wrong. It was then Archie realized what she meant. Upon glancing at Roxanne, who was busying about in the kitchen, he turned back to Benny and Estella. "We still need to keep Mr. Damaris away from Mommy, but we can't act rashly." The other two nodded in agreement. "Play along." At noon, Roxanne had just finished preparing lunch when the doorbell rang. After 2 warnings from Jack that morning, Roxanne and the kids were now immune to the sound of the doorbell even though they knew it was most probably Lucian this time. Roxanne set the table for the kids before she went to answer the door. As expected, Lucian was waiting outside. Roxanne opened the door, and he gave her a curt nod. "Where is Essie?" "I'm here to bring her home." He looked in the direction of the living room. When the children realized Lucian was here, they held their breaths and strained to listen to the faint sounds of his movements outside the door. Upon hearing Estella's name, the boys simultaneously turned their heads in her direction. Estella puffed her cheeks and met their eyes reluctantly. According to their plan, she would have to follow Lucian back and try to convince him while the boys would be responsible for changing Roxanne's mind. That way, Lucian and Roxanne could make peace with one another soon. It was time to leave, but Estella couldn't bear to part with Roxanne and the boys. The little girl was feeling hesitant when Roxanne's voice rang out. "Are you in a hurry? If you're not, you're welcome to join us for lunch." Everyone's expressions changed drastically when they heard that. The children were overjoyed when they heard Roxanne inviting Lucian to stay, while Lucian was uncertain what her invitation entailed. Roxanne turned over her shoulder to glance at the dining room. She lowered her voice and said, "I need to talk to you about Essie." With that, she met Lucian's gaze boldly. Lucian furrowed his brows. He accepted her invitation and followed her into the dining room. The children were excited at the sight of him entering, but they dared not express their exhilaration openly. Benny hung his head low to conceal his excitement. This is great! It's been a long time since Daddy and Mommy have sat down to enjoy a meal together. This means that their relationship has improved, right? The children kept stealing glances at Roxanne and Lucian over lunch. Roxanne had accurately predicted what the children were thinking. The realization caused her to look away as conflicting emotions swirled around in her heart. Lucian could read the kids' minds, too. As the children continued to steal glances at them, he couldn't help but become increasingly intrigued by Roxanne's response. He subtly raised his head to get a better glimpse of her. The mere sight of Roxanne diligently chowing down on her food caused his gaze to harden. Suddenly, he had no appetite whatsoever. I'm done. Lucian put his fork down, his face devoid of expression. Daddy, Estella thought he wanted to bring her home right now, so she grabbed his sleeves pleadingly. Let's go back home later. Lucian's brows snapped together. He patted her head and assured her, I need to talk to Ms. Jarvis. You can play a bit more with the boys. Roxanne had lowered her voice deliberately when she mentioned Estella's name earlier, leading him to deduce that she wanted to keep her conversation with him a secret from the others. It concerned his daughter, so Lucian was willing to play along with her. Estella had no idea what Lucian and Roxanne wanted to talk about. However, relief washed over her when she realized she could spend a bit more time with Archie and Benny. She couldn't help but crack a broad smile. Any problem with that? Roxanne felt extremely uncomfortable under Lucian's penetrating gaze despite her valiant attempts to ignore him. When she heard his answer, she heaved a silent sigh of relief and put her fork down. Let's talk upstairs. Turning to the children, she instructed, finish your lunch before you go off to play. Archie and Benny nodded vigorously. Roxanne rose to her feet and shot Lucian a look. Getting her hint, he complied by getting up and following her up the stairs. They both came to a stop at the balcony on the second floor, one after another. Roxanne said nothing as she was wondering how she should start the conversation. Even after Estella had admitted to her mistake and apologized, she still couldn't believe that the little girl was capable of committing such an action. Naturally, Lucian would not believe her, as he loved Estella dearly. If she were to reveal the truth bluntly, Lucian would most probably think she was trying to blame Estella for something the little girl didn't do. She remained silent for a long time, causing Lucian's expression to turn as dark as thunder. Ms. Jarvis, what is this about? Roxanne snapped out of her reverie. She parted her lips but had no idea how to start. Lucian's brows furrowed. Don't tell me you tricked me just so Essie could stay for a bit longer. His words reminded Roxanne of the time when he had thought it was her idea for Archie and Benny to sneak into the Farwell residence. She didn't manage to clear things up back then. If he continued to misunderstand her this time, she would never regain his trust. With that thought in mind, Roxanne frowned and said, Essie is your daughter, so she needs to go back home with you anyhow. Why would I resort to tricks to make her stay? Lucian cast her a suspicious look. Then speak. What is it? Roxanne took a deep breath before meeting his eyes. I believe Essie grew up by your side, right? Lucian didn't respond for some time. Roxanne noticed his expression changing. She might be wrong, but she saw a hint of mockery on his face that was directed at her. She was momentarily stunned by that. I merely asked him if Essie grew up with him, as I wanted to know if he knows Essie's character well. Why is he mad at me? The confusion on her face only served to upset Lucian even more. She's Essie's birth mother, but she never participated in her childhood. How dare she ask me that question? Despite knowing it was a misunderstanding, Lucian couldn't help but fume silently. It took him a while before he replied stiffly, "Yes." "Any problem with that?" Roxanne gathered her thoughts, as she could sense the tension in the air. She carefully asked the next question. "Then what do you think about Essie's character?" Lucian replied calmly, "Essie has always been a good girl." Roxanne knitted her brows, seemingly displeased by his answer. Lucian never looked away from her, so he naturally noticed the change in her expression, which increased his fury. "What do you think, Ms. Jarvis?" "Essie was diagnosed with autism at a young age, so I believe you've seen her when she was sick. What do you think someone like her would be like?" Blame. Roxanne had not explained it clearly, but Lucian could infer what the issue was about. "Essie must have done something that upset her, so she wants to confront me." Roxanne could sense the change in his emotions clearly as the surrounding temperature kept dropping. She instinctively stepped back to maintain a distance from Lucian. Upset with her thoughts about Estella, Lucian moved closer to her with an inquisitive gaze. As the gap between them closed, Roxanne dug her nails into her palms and willed herself to remain calm so they could continue their conversation. "I think Essie is a bit stubborn. It may be because she has autism, but she can't express her emotions clearly." Hearing that, Lucian finally halted in his tracks. Estella tended to be stubborn, and he knew that. However, he had never pondered over it. Estella was particularly stubborn when it came to Roxanne. She refused to listen to anyone else, and as a result, her condition would worsen. Yet, she would get better swiftly if she got to spend time with Roxanne. How does Roxanne know about this? Frowning, Lucian asked, "Why did you say that?" Roxanne turned around and looked downstairs. From her position, she could see the spot where Jack had parked his car that morning. She could even visualize how Estella had done that in her mind. Roxanne related the story to him. "Yesterday, I was supposed to have a medical consultation with Mr. Damaris. I had to take a day off because I needed to take care of Essie. Mr. Damaris was worried and came to visit me this morning with a bouquet of flowers. Essie misunderstood our relationship and punctured one of Mr. Damaris' car tires." Having said that, she let out a helpless sigh. Lucian followed her gaze, and his eyes immediately turned dark when he heard her mention Jack's name. "Do you have evidence to prove that Essie punctured Mr. Damaris' car tire? Or did you trust his words alone?" Of course, he trusted Estella unconditionally. Lucian couldn't imagine Estella doing such a deed when she was autistic. The only possibility was that Roxanne had chosen to believe Jack's version of the story and wrongly blamed Estella. Lucian felt a stab of anger at that thought. Roxanne was surprised. "Mr. Farwell, I understand that you have misunderstood my relationship with Mr. Damaris, but I have always treated Essie equally to Archie and Benny. Why would I accuse her falsely? Even if it wasn't Estella, Roxanne wouldn't blame any other child for something they didn't do. She took a deep breath and continued, "Mr. Farwell, this may be difficult for you to accept, but Essie confessed to it. I didn't believe it at first, but it's true." Lucian's expression was icy cool as he scrutinized her. Roxanne met his gaze calmly. "I don't want Essie to recount the incident. If you don't believe me, we can go check the surveillance footage." It was pretty obvious by now that she was telling the truth, so Lucian chose to trust her. He frowned and looked away from Roxanne, his thoughts a mystery to those around him. No longer related. Roxanne knew Lucian finally believed her, so she broke the silence, her voice calm and gentle. "This is not a confrontation. I'm just worried about Essie's well-being. If it's her autism that causes her to be this extreme, I hope you can help her by taking her to see a professional for support and guidance." She had assumed that Lucian would consider her suggestion, but Lucian immediately responded curtly, "I don't think there's anything wrong with what Essie did." Roxanne froze in shock. Estella damaged someone else's property at a young age, yet Lucian thinks she didn't do anything wrong? For a moment, Roxanne doubted herself and wondered if she was wrong. Estella did that not because of her autism or her innate personality. She did that because Lucian taught her to. Could that be the reason? Roxanne tried to reason with Lucian. Even if she's a child, she should understand that it's wrong to touch someone else's property. It's a car tire, on top of that. The consequences of a punctured tire can be severe. It can even lead to accidents and injuries. She stared at him incredulously. "Do you still think Essie didn't do anything wrong?" Lucian met her gaze calmly. "This is a simple concept that even a child can understand. Don't tell me Mr. Damaris cannot grasp this." His words brought a frown to Roxanne's face. She couldn't understand what he was referring to. Is Lucian saying that Jack touched someone else's property? What could it be? Suddenly, a shocking answer emerged in Roxanne's heart. She shot him a startled look before averting her gaze in panic. Lucian continued looking at her calmly. "No matter what my opinion is, Essie has always considered you as her mother. I'm sure you're aware of that." Roxanne hung her head low, as she couldn't refute his words. Indeed, Estella was very attached to her. The young girl had mentioned more than once that she wished Roxanne could be her mother. Roxanne was aware of Estella's wish but was not ready to face it. Now that Lucian had pointed it out, she felt guilty. "Essie thinks you treat her well and that you will be her mother one day by marrying me." Lucian stepped closer to her. "So in her eyes, Jack has touched someone who belongs to me. Isn't that right?" Roxanne instinctively took a step back as conflict swirled in her heart. She had to admit that Lucian's words had nearly caused a tsunami in her heart. "Please don't overstep your boundaries, Mr. Farwell." Roxanne forced herself to remain calm by digging her nails into her palm. It was uncertain who her words were meant for. "We are no longer related, so that is not a justification for Essie to do as she pleases." Lucian merely let out a snort. Roxanne felt her heart leap to her throat as she looked up and met his eyes. She might be wrong, but there seemed to be a hint of mockery in Lucian's eyes. Puzzled, Roxanne creased her brows and stepped back again. She belatedly realized what she was doing and forced herself to come to a stop. "This is strange." I was the one who came to Lucian to talk about Essie's condition, but he ended up forcing me into a corner as though I was the one at fault. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.